Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart, and today I'll be breaking down this two-game NBA play-in slate. That's right, this is the final play-in slate of the NBA before the playoffs start in a day. So these are winner-go-home games between the Bulls and the Heat, and the Thunder and the Timberwolves. So I'll be talking through these games, doing a game-by-game breakdown, going over my favorite really look core plays, kind of how I'm going to build my lineup, all that good stuff in this breakdown. If you guys want a more in-depth breakdown, that stays updated with all the news. It gives my final core play look before the slate starts. Make sure to check out my Patreon link down below for that, where I have a package for NBA DFS as well as PrizePicks, where I put up extra PrizePicks plays. Coming off a winning day in PrizePicks as well. So yeah, make sure to check that out. Hit that like button, and let's get into the video. Before we get into the breakdown, just want to do a quick little recap of my lineup here from the second day of the playing games between the Bulls and Raptors and the Thunder and Pelicans. I did not feel great about my lineup and just the overall lineup build, and so I wasn't going to enter into the 100K to first, but I ended up doing it at the last second, and I should have listened to myself. Wasn't feeling great about the just the value, and the value just did not hit. So here's my lineup with Crusoe. Not really sure why he was only 23% owned. I mean, he was 3,900, was clearly going to play 30 plus minutes if he just did not get in foul trouble. He played 31, an absolute smash there, so that was great. Isaiah Joe, just a huge disappointment. Same thing with Gary Trent, 66% owned, went for 6 fantasy points. Jalen Williams, surprisingly low owned and bailed out the faders. He played 40 minutes, shot 414, just did nothing, which is frustrating. But he should be another great play tonight. Portal, of course, did nothing, 23 fantasy points. Van Fleet was great, 60. Brandon Ingram, 48 was fine. J Val, 44 was great. Here was the winning lineup in the 100K to first. It was 329. Crusoe, Levine, DeRozan, Herb Jones, Vooch, Van Fleet, Dort, and Jalen Williams. And then moving on to, I made two lineups, so that was my 100K to first lineup. This is just more of the low stakes single entry. Replaced Isaiah Joe with Kobe White. Went to the same kind of same four besides that. Then Vooch, Van Fleet, Levine, and J Val. And this one won me some money back and a few extra bucks. So those are the two lineups I made the other day. Looking to continue the hopefully good streak into tonight. I had a very very solid lineup the first play in slates. Yesterday was okay, or the second round was okay. Now we get the third round of the play in games. These are winner go home for all four teams to make it into the playoffs. So they're all battling for the last two spots in the West Conference and the East Conference. So huge games tonight for these teams. Expect massive amount of minutes for all these guys. 40 plus for like the main stars, 2 to 3 stars on each side, and very tight rotations off the bench. Like so for the first day, there was clear value that ended up hitting and working out. The second round of the playing games, as we saw the other day, Isaiah Joe, Van Fleet, or excuse me, Isaiah Joe and Gary Trent Jr. Were the clear value plays, and they just busted. So keep that in mind. You don't have to go the more like the stars and value build for tonight. As we saw, obviously, as I just mentioned, the last it didn't work, and if you built more of a balanced build, you had a really good night. And so that could be the same thing for tonight. Like there's not a lot of value here between the Heat and Bulls or the Thunder and Minnesota Wolves. So it's like we could have another night where there is just no value under 5,000 that does anything. And so the balanced approach would be the best build for tonight if you think that happens. If you think there is some value that you can force in that will get you 15, 20 fancy points, then I'd say it's a lot safer to go with like the more like stars and scrubs approach. So it just comes down to kind of your take on how the slate goes. But as right now, it does feel like forcing value is kind of the route. Um, that's kind of how it feels for tonight. It's like you're just kind of forcing value, but we'll see if anything opens up. There is some news on the Heat side that could definitely change a few things, so we'll wait for that. But moving into this first game, Chicago and the Heat, the Bulls versus the Heat. Uh, Terrible game environment. I think the total is like 208 right now, so it's even worse than the Raptors game. So they're expecting this game to be pretty low scoring, pretty slow paced. But with that in mind, I don't really care. Obviously, 2 game slate, you're going to need some pieces from both these teams. So starting off with the Bulls here, Levine, DeRozan, Vooch, all look great at the price tags. Obviously, Levine was the best one in that last game there. Went for 39 real life points, 52 fantasy points overall. He was super aggressive, got to the free throw line like 10 times straight. He looks great. I mean, all three look fantastic. It really just comes down to ownership for me. I do think the most popular two, I think the in terms of like ownership ranking, Levine will probably be the most popular, then Vooch, then DeRozan. With that in mind, if that's going to, and if it's a huge like discrepancy, like if Levine's like 50 plus percent and the other two are like 35% or lower, I'd rather take a shot on the other two. That's just kind of how I'm going to go. I think all three are fantastic plays. It's just I prefer kind of going just a little bit of the ownership route when it comes to, kind of deciding how I want to attack the main three. So I think right now I'm leaning towards Vooch and maybe DeRozan, but obviously Levine looks fantastic as well. Really just comes down to ownership for me. The rest of the team, there's not much to like besides Kobe White and Pat Williams, which we'll get to in a minute. I think Caruso's playable. I mean, he should be in line for another game where he plays probably 30 plus minutes. He can get you there. He can get you another, mid to high 20s fantasy points. It's just, can he hit his shots? Like, obviously, these games didn't do great, didn't play a ton of minutes, but in the games that he does play, like the high 20s, even to the 30s minutes, he can get you there into mid 20s. But there are games where it's like he plays 30 minutes, gets you 19, plays 30, only got you 20, 26, 20, 26, 23, but then 20, 11, 27, 20, 16.5, 32 minutes, only 14. So I don't know. It's kind of risky at this price tag now. I think he's playable, but I just don't love his price tag. Moving on to Kobe White, Pat Williams, 4,800 and 4,700. Both of them are kind of like the sparks off the bench. So if any of the guys in the starting lineup get in foul trouble or if they're just not doing well, they will look to Kobe White and Pat Williams off the bench, who should both, be super aggressive. Kobe only shot 4 times, made all 4 of his shots, and the Pat Williams shot the ball 12 times. So he was super aggressive out there. So I like both of them as like kind of I guess lower tier mid-range value plays, 4,800, 4,700. They both should see anywhere from like 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how, if there's any foul trouble, how they're playing, how the other people are playing. So I think both of them look like solid plays if you want anyone under 5,000 on the slate. In terms of the rest of the team, sure, you can get to Beverly. I mean, he'll see mid 20s minutes, but he just hasn't been great. And that's really it. They're not really using anyone else. Moving on to Miami, Spolstra did say that they're going to switch up a few things with the starting lineup. So it's just their overall rotation. So I think what that means, obviously, we're still waiting. We're still kind of speculating, but I think that means they're going to move Lowry into the starting lineup for Vincent, and then they're going to move in Martin over Struess. I think kind of that's probably the route they're going to go. So we'll have to wait and see if that happens. Jimmy still looks great at 9,000. I really, really like Bam here in a bounce back spot. I think both Jimmy and Bam are the clear plays on the Heat side. If Lowry gets moved in the starting lineup, I'd prefer him over Hero. Depending on how all the ownership shakes out between these Heat guys, Hero could be the lowest own of like the starting five, which would make him very, very intriguing here against the Bulls. But he does lose some playmaking ability with Kyle Lowry in there. We know Kyle Lowry's a playmaker. That's kind of what his role has been all year for the Heat, especially coming off the bench. Last game was more of an outlier. 11 to 16, 6 to 9 from three. Did everything. Was pretty much the whole team and kept them in the game. I just don't think we can expect that tonight. But his price tag 5,600. I still think he looks very, very solid for a guy that should play 25 to 30 minutes. He will be a playmaker. Has that ability to get you at least 25 fantasy points, if not a few more. So I do like Lowry. It does take a hit to Hero's like playmaking usage. So it makes Hero more of like just a score. So I think right now, Jimmy and Bam are my clear favorites. Lowry looks like a very, very solid play there in the mid range. Hero, just depending on ownership, if we want to get him or not. In terms of like off the bench, and I do like Caleb Martin, 4,500. He's another play. He's kind of like a little bit worse version of like a Pat Williams and a Kobe White, just in terms of, he's one of those cheap price tags, like 4,500, just like them. He will play like 25 to 33 ish minutes, kind of like them, depending on how he's playing. Other people are playing, but he's just very, very scoring dependent, pretty much. Like he will get you perfect stats. It just comes down to, can he hit a few shots? If he can easily pay off his price tag. If he doesn't, he can absolutely screw you. So he's definitely the riskier version of the kind of the trio there that I just mentioned. But I think he's a solid play. And then I expect Vincent and Struess off the bench. Sure, you can get some. I just don't love the price tags. And then maybe we see a little bit of Duncan Robinson at flat minimum price tag. Maybe we see Kevin Love, who only played 3 minutes last game. I'm not really sure. I'd rather wait and see kind of how Spoelstra says they're going to roll out their starters, but that's kind of the information there. We'd still have to wait on some information. But yeah, moving on to this second game here, OKC in Minnesota. SGA is the literally the only spin up on the slate today. It's a 1,400 difference between him and the next highest like spin up play, which is Jimmy. So if you feel good with the value for today, which obviously, as I said, there's not a lot. Maybe it keeps SGA's ownership low. If that's the case, 10-4 for him against Minnesota looks fantastic. So I think that's another ownership play where it's like if he's sub 25%, 20%, maybe even less, I'd really, really like him against Minnesota. We know the upside with him. Giddy is just in another ownership play. I mentioned last slate, I'd really like him if he was low owned. He was low owned and he absolutely smashed, went for 61, almost a triple double. So we know the upside is there with him. It's just one of those things. I don't love the price tag unless he's going to be like 15% or less owned. Jalen Williams had a very disappointing game, played 40 minutes, shot 4-14, just could not hit a shot. Still got us almost 25 fantasy points. So I love running it back with him. We know the upside with him. It just comes down to can he hit the shots. He didn't last game. I expect a bounce back spot here for him today. Lou Dort, I think, is a fine play. It'll be interesting to see if people do chase the ownership here. He played 36 minutes, kind of hit everything. 7-8 from the free throw line, 4 of 8 3, 8 of 14 overall. It's just like everything kind of lined up for him to have a ceiling game, and he did. So I guess he's an okay play. He should be in line to play huge minutes, like about 35 to 40, guarding Anthony Edwards. It's just I don't trust the offensive production to be the same like it was last game. So for that reason, I'd prefer getting to Giddy, SGA, or Jalen Williams, and then Dort would be kind of like my fourth option there. Moving on to the other Jalen Williams, the big 32 minutes. He almost went for a triple double, 8, 8, and 8, 32 and a half fantasy points. I think he's a solid play. Now, I do think he will probably be like 60% owned on this slate just because there's not a lot of value below 40, even below 5,000. So I think a lot of people are going to see this box score 32 minutes, 32 and a half fantasy points. And I think a lot of people will chase him. He's an okay point per minute guy, not the best. He does get in foul trouble at times. So I could see this being a spot where he's super, super high owned, super chalky, like 60, 70% owned. And he goes out there and gets in foul trouble or just does bad and they bench him, which the Thunder did run a tight rotation last game. But I think it could be the situation where if he does bad and gets in foul trouble, they will open up the bench. So that's the risk there. If he's going to be 60, 70% owned, I think I'd rather take a shot on maybe like a Saric off the bench who would probably fill in for him if Jalen Williams does get in foul trouble. So I think overall he's a solid play. 4,400 should see 20 plus minutes, but it's really just comes down to how you think he does shooting the ball and scoring the ball. Isaiah Joe, I think it's a fair dart throw play. Played 19 minutes, just wasn't involved, just 1 of 5. So if he gets hot, he can definitely go off in 21 minutes. As you saw the game versus Utah, 23 fantasy points. So I still don't mind taking a shot on him. It's just super, super risky. Wiggins, 14 minutes, kind of the same thing. Like if they get hot, they can definitely pay off their price tags, but it's just a very risky value. Saric, as I mentioned, I'd like taking a shot on him. If you think Jalen Williams gets in foul trouble, Saric would be kind of the main beneficiary there, 3,400. And we know Minnesota's big. Like Gobert is questionable, but if Gobert plays, Cat plays, I do think the Thunder are going to have to play some of their bigger guys, which kind of opens up the shot to take a shot on a guy like Saric, to maybe take a shot on a guy like JRE, who didn't play last game. So I'd prefer obviously taking that shot on Saric, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe that opens up a possibility for some bigger guys off the bench to play. So I do like Saric. It's kind of like a very risky dart throw play here for today's slate. Moving on to Minnesota. On the Minnesota side, Anthony Edwards looks great at 8-8. Coming off a terrible game there. Still went for 32 and a half fantasy points, even though he went 3 of 17 from the field. That is crazy. But he looks good. Towns looks great. Both of them look super, super solid. So I do like both of them as some spin up plays. They should both be super popular. I don't mind Gobert as like just a very risky contrarian mid range option. We know the upside with him. He should be in line to see a ton of rebounds. But we're still waiting to see if he's going to be playing or not. I guess there is some chance that he doesn't play. If he misses for some reason, Kyle Anderson should probably start again. He'd be a very, very solid play. Played 45 minutes, went for 54 fantasy points. Obviously, 4 steals, 4 blocks, really, really helped out his ceiling there. That is 16 extra points. Don't think we expect that again, but if he's going to be playing 40 plus minutes, almost the whole game, I do really like him there at 7,400. Same thing like Mike Conley. He played the whole game, 44 minutes there, 43 and a half fantasy points. So I do really like both those guys just because they're playing huge, huge minutes. And then Torian Prince would probably start as well. He'd be 5,200. He'd be a solid play there. 43 minutes, 5 of 11, 24 fantasy points. I think he's a solid play there if it's in the 5K range. Nothing crazy, just solid. And then moving on to the kind of the bench guys, we did see NAW and McLaughlin as the two main guys off the bench, and then they did put in Noel. I still think Noel is my favorite of the three. I know NAW had the better game, 23 minutes, went for 21 and a half fantasy points. I do think people will chase that. I just rather take a shot at Noel, who we know has been their main six man off the bench. Just didn't get the minutes last game. I think they're going to give him some more minutes, especially if they do need some scoring off the bench. Noel will be aggressive, so I do like him a good amount. And then in terms of bigs off the bench, obviously if Gobert is out, it really doesn't open up much. I think Nathan Knight was the only one that played off the bench in terms of like big guys, and he played 2 minutes. So I don't think we need to take a shot or look to the big guys off the bench. That's going to do it for today, guys. So if you guys like the video, hit the like button and subscribe. These are the three main guys I'm looking at so far. Obviously, I'll have a more updated core and slate breakdown in my Patreon link down below. I'll have a price Picks video out after this, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.